So how long does it take to learn how to PK in old school RuneScape? Or more simply put, when will the number of times you defeat your opponent outnumber the times you yourself are defeated? A process I like to call the PK learning curve. Of course, you can get into the nuances to this question, such as the type of PKing you are trying to learn and the individual experience for each player. For myself though, as someone learning how to PK, working towards learning how to tribrid, I have humbly started back at square one, that being free-to-play PKing, acknowledging it has proven to be easier said than done. As I have also undertaken the task of documenting my learning curve experience, more explicitly keeping track of my fights, their outcomes, and time played. In doing so, I have also gathered large sums of PK footage, which has proven to be rather valuable, as a review has revealed feedback and missed lessons, with these experiences and lessons learned being showcased in my PK videos. And now, having finally broken through the free-to-play PK learning curve, with this video being that story. And yes, the title is correct in sharing that it took me 800 fights to do so. And how I've measured this breakthrough is by placing my fights into brackets of 100. As you see, fights in RuneScape have only 3 outcomes. That being, victory by defeating your opponent, your own defeat by death, and lastly, by a player teleporting or running. Using this data to discover my respective KD ratio per 100 fight bracket, then using these ratios as a means to measure my progress. Continually picking myself up and working towards the day where the ratio swings positive, in favor of more kills to deaths. And to show how this has been a rather uphill journey, I will be displaying my historic KD ratios to date. And yes, with my latest 100 fights, a first happening. My kills finally outnumbered my deaths. Now there are definitely some factors I wish to address in respect to my latest bracket, those to be shared in the latter part of this video. But till then, my latest 100 fight outcomes themselves were the following: 39 kills, 35 deaths, and 26 fights ending in a player running, giving me my first positive KD ratio of 1.1 to 1. Now, this is no home run hit out of the park or even a light at the end of the tunnel, but for the first time, I've made it to base and have light in the tunnel, as there's still much work to do here. Keeping in mind, a heavy factor when looking at any of my fight data is that I am a hobbyist when it comes to PKing, as these fights have taken place in my leisure time and rather sporadically with long breaks in between them, with overall fight gameplay being roughly 70 hours to date. But showing here, even if PKing remains a hobby long enough, progress can be made to the point of breakthrough. Now, you can still view my KD ratio as negative when looking at the cumulative fight data, having 247 kills to 336 deaths to date. However, I believe analyzing the fights in brackets is more valuable and accurate as a means to measure progress, as I have been making changes for my lessons learned along the way. For those wanting to learn how to PK themselves though, you can take stock after your first death, knowing that there's this other guy out there who has died 336 times before breaking any ground. Now regarding the unique nature of my latest 100 fight bracket, as this was the first time I PK'd on an optimal free-to-play peer. As I have repeatedly shared that free-to-play PKing is not pure in its nature, being comprised of peers trained traditionally in free-to-play and non-traditionally trained peers built in a pay-to-play environment. These pay-to-play peers being optimal due to their DPS and max hit in respect to their combat level. Myself, having PK'd the majority of time on a more traditionally built free-to-play peer, perhaps steepening my learning curve as a beginner. But now, having built an optimal free-to-play peer from scratch in pay-to-play, the account itself being a range warhammer peer, taking roughly 76 hours to create, with my entry PK stats being the following: 1 attack, 68 strength, 50 range, 25 magic, and 38 hit points. Additionally, having 1.4 million starting GP for PK gear and supplies, purchasing a starting 10 sets with still surplus GP as I entered my fight bracket. Noting, if anyone does wish to replicate the creation of this peer, I have created a step-by-step guide and will be linking it at the end of the video for your reference. Now continuing the video with the lessons learned section, And I would say that these lessons fall under what I call a management category, with the first being management of my boosted stats. You see, there is only one combat boosting potion in free-to-play, that being the strength potion. Now the boosted effects of this potion does vary, the boost being dependent on where your strength level falls on a range of levels, with the boosted levels then decreasing by 1 per 1 minute of gameplay. And when playing on the RuneLite client, specific settings can be turned on to view boosted effects and its respective boosted timer. And after fighting in hundreds of free-to-play peer fights, I've noticed these fights themselves last a few minutes in length at most before a player will run out of food, which got me thinking that this potion can be used better, as it contains 4 1-minute doses of a potted max hit, becoming a factor in my choosing of 68 strength, as my potted level became 77, changing my base hit from 17 to a potted max of 19. And as I previously shared, with fight lengths lasting a few minutes at most, I implemented the habit of checking my boosted level and maintaining it throughout the fight, the habit itself proving its value. And building on the topic of management comes the lesson of stat management, having earlier this year built 2 range warhammer peers from scratch, leading me to become more aware and mindful of my PK stats in respect to my combat level. Noting that this stat management is more pertinent when PKing at lower combat levels, as the increasing of stats happens much more rapidly, as RuneScape's experience gain to leveling process is exponential. As many may know, when it comes to leveling in RuneScape, the classic half in 99 is truly 92. A super side note to this, but I've actually made this question a deal breaker with girlfriends of the past. Now, these girls don't understand it, they don't know what I'm talking about, but they know if they do want to stick around, they gotta remember it. And unless you're PKing on an Iron Man, gaining experience will be a byproduct of your PKing. Having shared my stats at the start of the video, but in just 100 fights, having my range level increased to 55 and hit points to 44, overall increasing my combat level to 37, but noting no change to my melee or range max hit, decreasing my optimized stats for my combat level. Of course, your PvP counterparts will also be gaining experience alongside you, having similar effects on their account stats. However, there will be those re-optimizing along the way, as when certain stats are gained, it can create opportunity for levels elsewhere, without the changing of your combat level. More explicitly, opportunity on an account like this one built in pay-to-play, as the pay-to-play environment allows for non-hit point combat training. The levels themselves that you can gain can be revealed when playing on the RuneLite client or discovered by a combat calculator. Myself, having made minor adjustments before I returned to PKing, that being an additional 4 hours at the pump for 1 more strength level. Now this was done to extend my potted max hit window from my earlier lesson by another minute, as there were times I was caught between continuing my DPS or drinking my potion. Additionally gaining 10 attack levels, as I have noticed far less consistency in my hits with the rune warhammer being at 1 attack. The gaining of any attack levels very much being optional, noting that I have begun seeing more peers doing so. These changes themselves being the re-optimization that I just shared about, as they had no direct change to my combat level. Now a final note is to not get too caught up in optimizing your peer and the re-optimization of it. Looking back, I myself have been guilty of this, having spent more time training my peers than PKing itself, which I would share is also something that I struggle with outside of this game, very much being someone who wants all the little things placed in order before taking the first step forward. But as time continues to show me, there is a place for that. But true experience and growth comes from the doing of the thing itself. So when it comes to optimization, just keep it in the back of your mind. but know that time spent Pking will trump it every time. With that being said, I still have some questions with free-to-play Pking. The answers I have found though, I'll look forward to sharing them in a future video, and we'll see you next time.